Good day, students. This video is about the code for the two subclasses in our employees example task. Remember, the task is about inheritance. How do we code inheritance? And this specific task is how to calculate the salaries of employees. We already talked about the superclass employee on the right-hand side of your screen. We already looked at the code for the superclass. On the left-hand side, let's look at the specifications for the two. The full-time employees will earn a basic salary that it will be captured from the keyboard and also an allowance that will be calculated. The condition will be the employee must be married and 30 years or older to get a 10% allowance based on the basic salary. For part-time workers, the salary is calculated using the hours worked and the rate per hour. These two items will be captured from the keyboard as well. So, you are busy with this assignment to do the code for any one of the two subclasses. So, let's go for the full-time employee. If we go down, step 2 then, we get the explanation of how to code that. The name of the class, full-time emp, and then of course, data fields from your superclass. That is the reason for inheritance. We already coded all of that. We don't want to repeat the code or duplicate the code in our subclasses, so we will inherit all the code from our superclass. The only thing that we need to add that's not part of the superclass but specific to our full-time worker is the basic salary. So we code that as a private instance field. This class must also have its own no arguments or default constructor as well as a parameterized constructor, which we'll discuss in a minute. Accessors. In this case, we only have one accessor because we only have one data field. The other methods that we need is the calculation of the allowance, which is only specific to our full-time workers. And then we need to add two items to our two-string string as far as the age in our superclass. We need to add two more items for our full-time workers, which we'll look at the code in a minute. All right, so we've determined what we need in our subclass. So let's go and look at the code. The first thing you do is to inherit. You can do it later on as well, but it must be part of your code in the end. So we extends from employee, the superclass. Look at the name of the superclass must be correct. We have only one private data field, which is salary. We have our default constructor. We must code that constructor. If you watched the previous video, remember the one on constructor chaining, it's explained clearly why you need that. Then we need our parameterized constructor, and this is this next step where we have new code that we're not used to. Even though we have only one instance field here, the subclass must receive all the employee, which is the name, the ID number, the married data field, and the salary. These three items will be transferred to the superclass, and the salary will stay local to the subclass. How to do that is the very first instruction. It cannot be the second or the third instruction. It must be done first. Again, referring to the video on chaining of constructors. It must be called first because you need an instance of the superclass before you can inherit any of its or use any of its methods. That is why you need to call the superclass constructor to invoke or create. So the keyword is super without a dot. Then you list the attributes that is that you need to transfer to your superclass, which is the name, the ID number, and married. The local attribute will stay here. You will assign the parameter salary to the local attribute salary in your constructor. The accessory you need here is only one because you only have the one data field, salary. Calculate allowance, as we've read in our assignment, whether the employee is married or not and the age of the employee. The problem is that those two methods are coded in the superclass. So you need to get it from the superclass. Please don't code it again here. You can't do that because then you defeat the purpose of inheritance. So to get hold of the information, whether the person is married or not, you'll call the method from the superclass using the super keyword. In this case, it's super dot. If you use super without the dot, you are referring to the constructor of the superclass. With the dot, you are referring to a method in the superclass. So super dot get married. If it's an M, that's the way you will capture it in the test class. We look at that in a minute. And super dot calc age, also a method from your superclass. If it's greater equal to 30, then you calculate your allowance. Before, the first instruction is you assign 0 to your allowance. So only if the conditions are met, the allowance will be something different, otherwise it will be 0. In the toString method, again, we're not used to coding it in this way. With inheritance, we need to code it now in this way. We need to call the string that was constructed by the toString method in the superclass first. Remember, it's the name, the ID number, married, and the age. So that part of the toString method, we get it from our superclass. The first element in your formatting string will refer to that string that you will receive from your superclass. The two items that we add in this subclass will be the basic salary and the allowance. So we will have two items. The first, the one that's the salary formatting is done, as you can see in your formatting string. And then following that, you have the formatting for your allowance. The items listed then will be the string received from your superclass, then the salary, and then method that's local to this subclass. So those are the new things in your subclass. So once you've coded that, you can compile that and then start coding your part-time subclass, which we will discuss in the next video.